Call to order this meeting of the Oxridge Building Committee for January 16th. Mike is not going to be here today, so I'm not going to ask him to provide the minutes. We'll get those next time. So our third item on our agenda is to discuss for the people who weren't there, the last design development workshop, which we held last week. And Diane, maybe you'd like to take it away.
Certainly, yes.
I provided a larger picture of the floor plan so people could actually see it.
So we met with SLAM. Amy Samuelson, Kent Morhart were there, along with Dave Cravanzola from O&G. And I think primarily what we did is review the modified floor plans that take into consideration all the changes that we agreed to at the end of the schematic design phase, and sort of the working through of those in a little bit more detailed fashion. There are a few changes to the plan that reflected that, and that was the basis of most of our discussion. Let's see. So a couple things. So SLAM said that they will provide to us a schematic design recap document. So right now, the schematic design documentation that we have online reflects the schematic design prior to the changes that we made at the end of schematic design. So they promised us they'd put a document together that would reflect the final version of that. Hopefully we'll get that soon. And also sort of other things that we talked about in the meeting included adding a mid-design development phase estimate to the project, so that budget estimate, so that we'll rather than waiting till the end of design development, which is a 6-week phase if I'm not mistaken, or 6 or 8 weeks, then we'll stop midway and do an estimate. So we'll better understand how the changes ripple through the schematic, the changes that we decided at the end of schematic design rippled through the design. And the other thing that SLAM was going to do is, and O&G at the end of the design development phase, rather than stopping the whole project for a month-long estimate period, SLAM's going to roll directly into construction documents and keep working during the estimate phase at the end of design development. So having that mid-design development estimate will give everybody more confidence that that's the way to proceed. And that's important because that's going to be a small addition to, I guess, O&G's fee in order to add that additional estimate. But I think we all agreed that that's really valuable to have that information early on.
Especially given that the first bid actually was significantly higher. We kind of want to get that precise so that we understand going into this whether we're going to need a new appropriation or not.
Have we formally acknowledged that? 'Cause I noticed the minutes said it was kind of up in the air with the decision on that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll check.
Yeah.
No, I did speak with Amy, saying, well, Amy, because I was talking about the minutes, that we agreed that they would do, I didn't want to call it an estimate, because an estimate takes a week or so.
Right.
I just want to call it a sort of audit check, and in other words, David didn't have to carve a week of time out to do that, and so it was. She said, "I understand," and I think Dave, when we talk with David, I'm sure he understands as well. It was just a quick check.
I'll get a quote from him.
Oh.
He's been a little bit tied up
Yeah.
last week.
I think the other thing to mention in the plan was in their updated plan, the use of the front here, the administration, how they put that together. You may want to comment.
Yeah, so the plan adjusted slightly, and I think got a little bit cleaner and more simple. I think that the kind of pushing and this work has actually simplified and improved the plan quite a bit. The administration has consolidated, and the entry area has sort of freed up from administration pieces to be kind of a clean open space. So when you enter the school, you see right through to the courtyard. And I think that's going to, and now I think SLAM is going to go on and work on designing that space to be really a special entrance that they haven't really spent a lot of time designing that space. I think they're going to start working on that now. They're studying more of the plans prior to the last meeting. In addition, the other changes at the art moved over to this wing where the gym and the music is. So and they thought that was also a positive shift to get all those functions together out of the classroom wings. And the library or the media center is all on one level now. Although there's a maker space down on the lower level, the understanding is that's kind of a different function. Whereas before it was in 3 spaces across the hall and upstairs and downstairs. Now it's all going to be on one level. So we thought that was a shift in the right direction as well. In addition, the plan accommodates a location for a potential future ELP classroom, that 10th classroom that the Board of Education agreed not to continue in the program, that they shifted down to 9 classrooms. SLAM felt that it was really important to continue to keep the possibility of that 10th classroom in the design, at least as an ad alternate for this ongoing project. So there's a location that they've designated for that in the plan.
I would add that I found out what ad alternate means, and it means that when you put together your construction drawings, you have to have a complete construction drawing of your ad alternate. That would be expensive to do, rather than just call it a future site for a classroom. They would have to do the drawings, then they would have to have the bidding done with the ad alternate in it, and you'd have to choose your lowest bidder. It was strongly recommended by David Cravanzola that that is not the appropriate ad alternate concept. An ad alternate concept that works is, for example, the curtain wall in the gymnasium, where you're saying, I don't want that, but I'll leave it as an ad alternate. It's not going to change the design drawing, but here they'd have to do a whole foundation drawing, roof drawing, and that doesn't really make much sense.
Well, potentially we can keep it as such for the preliminary phases of the design. Maybe for this next estimate, it'll be an ad alternate, and just for the purpose of the estimates. Because I think Kent Moore-Hart in particular felt that 10th classroom was something that they should keep in there as a potential future option for pricing. He wasn't quite ready to let that go. So
He may not be, but I think that once we understand what it costs to do it, and where you can say, look, this is expansion space for whichever place you want to do it,
Right.
rather than putting the cost of drawing it all, bidding it all out, that may make more sense.
right, and we may decide after the next, when design development's over, that that's the direction we go in as well. Because I think at this point, that it isn't construction documents yet.
No, that's correct.
Yeah, if we don't think it's a viable option for this project at all, then we should scrap it. If we do, then you might want to consider further the ad alternate approach. But regardless, it's always there for future expandability, that space.
Space is there. Yeah.
Location, right, yeah.
Question on that. So you talked a second ago about the original design having split up the music and all that. It had it in 3 spots, and it kind of consolidated and felt simpler now, and that's good. When I hear that, I get a little worried that they're coming in with original designs that don't have that practicality. And I'm wondering whether that simplification was something that you did or thought through, or whether that was something that they suggested. Because part of the reason for bringing these guys in and the selection process was that they'd seen this movie before. We know what works. We understand simplicity and all of that. And the fact that they would come in with something like that as part of their original design makes me a little nervous, because what we're paying them for is to come in and say, this works, this is absolutely what you need, we've done this hundreds of times, not to worry. These are tested design concepts. You don't have to actually take responsibility for things like simplification and saying, oh, gee, it would be better if the music space was all together as opposed to disperse throughout the building. What's your sense of all that?
Schematic drawings is really getting the basic shape of the building.
Okay.
You see these things, but they're not nearly in stone.
Okay.
I've never seen at the beginning of DD and the end of the DD anywhere near the same.
Okay,
So you
there's
shouldn't
an
expect
it
the
is
detail
by
like
design
this.
an iterative process.
Really what they're doing is they're taking the space
Okay.
and putting it down and moving it in sort of the right conjunctions with
Okay.
each other, and that, I wouldn't
So
worry
that's
about
not a
that.
concern?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and that's driven by, those changes are driven by them. I think those are sort of in their mind, if we get the opportunity, it's going to be good to consolidate this, and with this shift, that opportunity arose, so those were.
Just wanted to make sure all that was fully at the table.
Diana,
Yeah.
I was
Good question.
I was struck by the amount of square footage that these learning kind of common spaces are. If you were to add them all up, and if you were to think about like a traditional school design, that concept wasn't there, right? It's just it basically would look like an ELP wing here with your classrooms on either side.
Well, one
Normal,
difference is that these
yeah.
house the lockers, so that's part of
Okay,
the
so
square
that's
footage.
what I was trying to figure out,
That's
is
what
like,
the
is this a
pink
giant,
is.
modern, educational kind of luxury concept that is fine if we're all on board, but it's, it's a ton of square footage
So
and
this kind of
area?
rose out of the desire to keep the lockers out of the classroom space.
Okay.
When Mary Beth had come this summer, Jen Tazia, one of our kindergarten teachers, she had specifically expressed that having the lockers outside of the space would really free up wall space that's at the appropriate level for the children. When you have the cubbies at levels that they can reach it, that then makes her have to post things way above their eye level. So her recommendation was to move the lockers outside of the classroom, and then doing that is what kind of created, I think, more opportunity to discuss the learning commons. Like, if we're going to have them out here, how can we make them multifunctional?
Yeah.
So I think if anybody else wants to chime
Are
in.
the classrooms smaller because
Yes.
of the locker? Okay, so this
Yeah.
is smaller than your average classroom because some of the space was like taken out to be put into the learning, like the common area.
Well,
The
the
other-
classroom, yeah, the classroom went from, if it was 1 through 5 grades, it went from 900 square feet, which included the lockers. It got reduced down to 930 square feet of usable floor area.
830, so minus.
I'm sorry, 830. And the same kind of dynamics with regard to the kindergarten.
Got
And
it.
there was a
And
lot
the-
of discussion about that because when touring Tokenique, the lockers are outside. So that was a model that everyone liked, but Luke has weighed in on it because I think some original conversations had the lockers back in the classroom.
But
This
Tokenique
is-
doesn't have this extent of
They do not.
ADA, right?
No.
No school in this town has that.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's both a learning strategy that SLAM advocates based on their experience.
Right.
The other place that the space came from is the media center. So that part of the design was that a small component of the media center square footage was designated to each grade level. And that a piece of the media center square footage is also what's being part of that pink rectangle in each grade
What are
level.
these half wall kind of?
So that's to be designed. Again, this is a
Okay.
block, and they made that clear. That's going to evolve in the next couple of weeks. As to now, it's just kind of a blob of space, but they're talking about dividing it up in a variety of ways to create table areas, sitting areas, counter space for working and whatnot.
It's not a 12-foot high wall.
Yeah.
Right, and that was a conversation we had, that we were not going to use tall two lockers that were stacked necessarily. We've talked about making sure we get the right size lockers and the lockers that are appropriately located and reachable by this age group.
It's almost like when I see it, it's like the whole open floor plan versus traditional lawyer office concept. And I'm just kind of curious, 10 years out, if we're going to all look at ourselves and be like, yeah, that whole like open area thing was kind of a disaster because the kids couldn't focus, you were distracted by the corridor.
I would say two things about this. One, I think that this is a good example of designing for a modern classroom. There really just is a lot more breakout space, and Luke, feel free to jump in if you want to comment on that. But we've talked about that quite a bit in some of our design meetings, how we're not just having 4 rows of 5 desks with a teacher in the front anymore. It's a lot more breakout spaces. So I think that this is designing for the future of education. The second thing that I'll say is, in terms of functionality, I think that this creates quite a bit of efficiencies. Anyone who's been in Oxbridge knows right now that we have a sprawling mass, and kids might have to walk from one end of the building all the way to the other in order to work with a reading specialist, that kind of thing. And then you take that times the tiniest feet, and that's a lot of steps to get there. So now a lot of those things can just be accomplished with a couple of steps into the hallway, and that's really going to give us more educational time and less travel time within the building. So So I think that that's another good function of this design.
Randy, if you remember back in the presentations by the final three,
Yeah.
all
All of
three-
them advocated this.
And particularly if you look at Antonazi, where they had the European
Yeah,
model.
yeah.
And the European school systems are the leaders in the world, and they all have that. In fact, they hardly have any classrooms.
Okay. I just have one last question on that, the design, and looking at the exterior. Could you put any color on the elimination of the going flat roof on ELP? Was that just to try and make it kind of consistent with the rest of the building? Was it a value engineering thing? What was the driver behind that mostly?
I think it was both. I think SLAM felt that it was inconsistent, that as the design of this flat roofed classroom wings and this piece were evolving, the ELP wing was getting more and more different with that sloped roof. So I think the first impetus was trying to make it more consistent, realizing it was a more economic measure to have a flat roof. But they also argued that the scale of this piece will be smaller without that addition of a sloped roof. So for the neighbor's point of view, it'll be a lower structure. And they hope to achieve that sort of broken down scale by keeping these kind of bay windows in each classroom, that sort of instead of the dormers is what my interpretation is, to break down the long length of wall to make it a little bit more of a residential scale. So I think it was both.
Okay.
And Mike Alfieri seemed to like it.
Yeah.
The revised.
Yeah, I said to him, he was right here, I said, Mike, what do you think? And he said, I think it's better. I said, okay.
He's got the best view.
Well, he's got the,
Yeah.
he'll have the most view. So
I do think when they show the drawings that when they show the one with the ELP left, in our last iteration with the pitched roofs and all of that, it did look like a separate school connected to a different one. So I do think that this is a much more cohesive design that, will continue to get refined in terms of like Diane's point about how we deal with those windows and like, do we change the materials a little bit now since the theme has evolved?
Right.
And then also gives the opportunity for us to focus a bit more on the entrance of the school as well, since we're
That's
not
right.
having.
There has to be
students
some sort of,
eating.
yeah, I think we've completely de-slamified the design. In terms of like the barn and like all of that stuff.
They went from agrarian to
Yeah,
institutional.
it's now, a brick square.
It's
Well-
more modern
Yeah.
institutional. So
Well,
Tough word.
that was their word, I'm not making it
Yeah.
up.
Is that what this?
Yeah.
We
So,
all gravitated toward the farm look up in Easton.
Yeah.
Right.
It's, it's part of the process.
Well, Easton had acres and acres of space to do whatever they
Yeah, that's
wanted
right.
to.
70 acres or so?
And to Katie's point about the entrance, I think that was something that they were also working on. This entrance to the ELP with the peaked roof seemed to have a lot of prominence and competed with the main entrance, where the function of the school is that everybody's coming into this entrance, and this just serves as, if I'm not mistaken, as a place where the kids leave in the afternoon. So they wanted to downplay that entrance, so that went along with the removal of the sloped roofs. And kind of looking again at the front entrance as the main entrance. And then with the exterior as well, they were going to study more, do more studies on the materials, moving away from the stone base again, which is part of this sort of agrarian style, looking more at a consistent material. And they showed us some studies of the exterior, and they're going to continue to develop the exterior window elevations and develop that to be more appropriate with the style of the building now. But I think we can agree, definitely, the building's more consistent with the sloped roofs gone, and it definitely has more of a modern feeling to it than the images we saw earlier. Oh, and the other point I wanted to make with the sloped roofs, this end wall of the ELP, again, had a lot of focus, was very prominent in previous drawings, so by making a flat roof here, again, it refocuses refocuses on the main entry, which I think was a positive move. And we'll see now, I think that now a little more design energy is going to be put into making that entry something more special.
Yeah, I think that's important to, I think that will be a good move also just from a security standpoint in that, if you remember, there's parking that's running along here too. So any cars that were to come in and park here, I think would quite naturally with that peaked roof and really what's the ELP exit, people would naturally be trying to come in that way. And by this being clearly just like classroom space from the exterior and, hopefully focusing more on what that entrance is and making it significant, I think will naturally drive people around the building, which will just save, our personnel from like watching and chasing people down who are getting lost.
Anything else on the last workshop?
Well, we're going to have another workshop after this meeting today where we'll see further developments of what we've spoke of, and then we're going to talk about, they're going to present to us the transition plan, or I guess it's...
Enabling plan.
Enabling plan, yes. So that'll be the two focuses of the conversation this afternoon, or this morning, rather.
Terrific work, thank you.
Thank you.
Rusty, master project schedule.
I'm not passing out this schedule.
We need an electron microscope to read it
No
anyway.
kidding. SLAM and ONG have been working diligently and has put a lot of work into it. The good news, I think we got a schedule now that we can live with. The enabling phase, which we're working on right now, will go off as planned. June 17th, the trucks will show up and all that, but we've got a lot of work to do between now and then to get the approvals, but it doesn't seem that it will be anything big. As Diane mentioned, after DD, SLAM is going directly into construction documents. That's not unusual, and it will pick up a lot of time instead of pausing and da-da-da-da. 5 weeks is a lot of time.
That's what they had.
That's what they had, 5 weeks.
They had 5 week
Yeah, we picked
delay.
up. And then in construction documents, actually going to start the estimates before those are quite complete, because many of the areas will have enough to go on. And we're going to bid everything else other than the enabling in one big fell swoop. However, we're going to have the due dates of different items staggered. Steel and concrete being the two big important ones, and possibly site. They'll be done earlier. The net of it is we'll be able to probably start mid-October, and they're working toward the beginning of October this year on the main plan.
For foundations and things of that, is that what you mean, in October?
No. Yes, the sites of the steel and the concrete.
Grading, the foundations, all that stuff.
They're going to do
Wow.
some of the grading in the summertime.
That's great.
But yeah, we're closing in on actual construction here. The net of it is that we should be through and have a CO in July, mid-July, which is what we had targeted.
Of 2022.
22. And we should also be through the project by the end of the year, which is, again, something that we wanted to do. So right now it's looking good. I think maybe there's even a little more time we can pull from here. We just have to check the town approvals and all that. That's what's holding us up. That's that last 5% before we can hand it out, and I anticipate that being done next week.
And I should add to that because of Randy speaking with Jeremy, why don't you tell him what the schedule with regard to the town approvals?
Yeah, so I think everything you've said is accurate in that we should be able to perform that enabling work in June from an approval process. The work plan that SLAM put together laid out, I think, generally accurate timelines for ZBA, P&Z, ARB, and EPC approval. It needs some fine tuning. Jeremy's recommended that we pull together a meeting of all of these different constituents. I'm going to try and set up for next Thursday. Anyone here is welcome to to join, let me know if you can. I don't know the exact time, but it would be in the morning. The concept there being getting more specific on exactly when we're having each of these specific meetings, uncovering any issues that are currently unknown by getting building department, which hasn't really been that involved yet. I think we've got some questions for them with regards to permitting and P&Z approval for the enabling phase, et cetera. But generally speaking, that's the update. I think the key one is Board of Appeals for the temporary site coverage variance that we're going to need, because we're going to have both schools up and running at the same time. So we need to go through that, but that seems very straightforward. It's a singular isolated item that's easy to explain. Environmental, I perceive to be pretty straightforward. It's just this one wetlands issue. Architectural review, I think the sooner the better for us to start having dialogue with them, especially since at a very first glance they should be able to see and have reactions to the materials, the scale of it all. So I'm going to recommend that we try and convene them as soon as possible. And P&Z is kind of the laggard in it all. After those pieces fall into place, sometime, call it, I'd say about a month and a half from now would be when I think we start meeting with them in earnest in a series of meetings. But so if we can get together next Thursday with a lot of these groups kind of in a working group session, my intent would be to map out the next, call it 12 weeks. So that could work well for your schedule update.
Yep.
Rusty, next week, is if we can kind of map all that out and then feed it over to David, and then we'd know exactly what we're going to do and stick to the dates.
That's Thursday?
We're going to shoot for Thursday, the 23rd.
Yeah, there's a meeting on security at the Board of Ed building from 8 to 9:30. So Jeremy was suggesting 9:45 because we would want SLAM to participate in the meeting as well. Okay, great. Next item of business is just a review of what we've spent to date, and we sent it all out to everybody. I'm sure you're dying to know that we spent $300 and some thousand. I don't know if John's coughing because he's very nervous.
There's a defibrillator in here somewhere. And that was just for the party, right?
That was the
That
part.
was his vacation in the
Oh,
Bahamas.
But I am going to ask John if you would bring out again at the appropriate time the prior spreadsheet we used at the garage.
Yep.
Not that we can't use this, but I mean for tracking when we get into real construction.
Well, and that's good. The reason I like that sheet was that it tracked it at a high level, not super detailed level, but it was easy to send around to anybody. So
Exactly.
people not on the committee, everybody could just say as a headline, this is where we are. So I've got that handy, I'll send you.
Okay, great. Because, I mean, this is obviously just keeping track of everything that we're spending in case there's any, and we have to do this anyway for the state. We have this record as a result.
Do you have that in Excel? Is that something you can send to me? Just
Jennifer has it.
does it? Okay, I'll check. I can call her
You can
there.
ask her. I mean, she
Yeah.
probably has it in Excel first, then puts it over to PDF to make sure no one
Okay, I need to call
fiddles
her
with
anyway,
it.
so I'll do that.
This is all from her.
Got it.
She runs this all the time.
Yep.
Every week, at the end of the week, when the checks are cut, she puts together. Next Tuesday, and we talked about this before, they're going to, SLAM and Diane, I'm not sure who else from the committee is going to be up visiting with our friend Diamantis Costa at the Office of School Construction Grant and Review, which is required as part of the process with the state. I sent around, I'm sure you all just went all through all those pages, but this was the form that they have to use for the state in case you see it. It's 5 pages, and it really just sort of, this is in the state's required form as to who has to do what, and they'll be up there talking about the size of the school, where we are on budget, or whatever the case may be. So I'm sure there'll be some feedback. We can hopefully remind them that we're giving Norwalk 80% of their money, whereas we're only asking for 10.7%.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky,
If we're real
if we're
lucky.
lucky, yeah. I would think that the other thing that we've mentioned so far is that in order to get through the enabling planning and be ready to go in June, as soon as school closes, the thought is we're not going to ask the state to reimburse us for that expense, because if the state requires us to go through a whole process and delay in getting the approvals, we don't know what it's going to cost exactly, but we're guessing around $800,000, $900,000, and that means we're giving up about $100,000 potentially if we had it considered eligible, but there's too much at risk for delaying, and we don't want to be caught.
I actually talked to Dave. They're going to ask them.
Sure.
But back away if there's
Anything
anything that's going to delay it.
Right.
And is it something that can be added to the end-of-day costs for reimbursement? You know, it's part of the project, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
but if you didn't get their approval in advance, it becomes ineligible.
Really?
Yes.
Very clear.
Very
Really?
clear. Oh, yeah.
Is it
Wow.
possible to get some kind of pre-approval way in advance where it's
Well, they're gonna-
sort of not to exceed or something like that that they can get comfortable with?
Well, we'll see. I mean, David Cravanzolo is going to ask that at the meeting
Okay.
next Tuesday. But the answer is don't count on it.
Don't count on it. Yeah.
Okay. However, SLAM has been in the design and keeping track of things to the extent that ELP, not just the classroom size, but has administrative space, allocation of nurses space. They're allocating as much as they can to the other areas in an effort to get the bonus, if you will, at the very end. Because we get a bonus for ELP. And all the other things, they're trying to make sure that they've allocated the space appropriately, once we're all through with our space designs. Is there any more questions with regard to our meeting next week?
Well, I had one question about and I always forget what it's called, the building performance standard.
Performance building
Performance
standard, yeah.
building standards.
Performance building standards, and I guess we need to set up a meeting. I don't see it on the list here necessarily as part of this review, but I think the state requires that we have that meeting, and it's to our benefit to follow up on that. So we should make sure, maybe we can talk with SLAM today when they're here about when is best to schedule that meeting in this phase.
I think that'll be scheduled with our commissioning agent. We've had the first meeting.
Yes.
You were there. The next one doesn't need to be right away.
Yeah, I think Amy mentioned last week it wasn't any part of this submission or review.
Right, so maybe better later, although it would be good to get feedback that might impact our decisions from the energy modelers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe we could actually just have a phone call to see if they've been looking at the design and what their feedback is.
One thing I forgot to
Yeah.
I forgot to mention is we know that in the cost management area, a big savings was in the site work from the initial. Much of that was based on certain assumptions and to be verified by test borings and test pits, which Landon is the engineer of record. Mike checked, and they have it scheduled to do all the borings and test pits next week.
Wow.
Some may start this weekend.
Some they start, okay, but by the end of next week,
And then the end of next week.
it'll all be completed.
Maybe they'll strike oil.
So-
That'll solve all of our budget problems.
Are they gonna discover where the old septic field was and all that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I got
yeah.
a couple bits out that way.
Okay, so,
They had an engineer on site that laid out everything,
right,
and, they're looking at trying to get the pits in the parking lot, those test pits dug this weekend,
okay.
and maybe the pits out in the field, and then the drill rig will be on site next week.
The drill rig.
Will that happen during school hours?
Yes, but they're going to, I'm thinking, just from what I remember about these pits being dug in the past, that you get 2 to 4 drills, bores done in a day with all the testing of the soil and everything like that. So if they start, 7 o'clock, like there's one down in between the pre-K wing and like where the art room is, they'll do that, start at 7 in the morning, or they'll start it at 3:15. They'll do that, so they'll be drilling out in the playing area.
How long does it typically take to drill one of those?
They've got it scheduled for
An hour and a
a
half
week.
to 2.5 hours per boring.
And what's the noise level like?
It's really not bad. It's a hydraulic, it runs off of the truck motor, off of the power takeoff. So you just hear a truck running, and it's not bad. I mean, it's not going to affect academically, I don't think, at all.
Mike, myself, and the team who are coming in to do it have been coordinating so far, and so we've got notices out to faculty and staff to say, these people are authorized to be here, and just a precursor run of everything that we need to do for the enabling phase in general. But yeah, we've been communicating about what it'll look like, if there's any access that needs to be shifted based on what they need to get done. So we'll stay in coordination and keep people up to speed as we know exactly what's happening, because I anticipate those kinds of questions as well.
Right.
That one corner that's like by room 116, there's no core boring there, because that's the area where the footing is grade or above grade. That's going to have fill brought in. So there's no boring right there where you would really impact the academic part of the school. It's all away.
And the good thing about that is that we'll know very quickly whether the assumptions made for the site savings are real.
And the assumption is no rock, pretty much, right?
Well, it's also type of soil. In other words, they have to have a certain type of soil for the foundation versus, obviously topsoils look great to have, but that's not going to be your foundation. So, anyway. All right. I have on here number 7, clarify lead role responsibilities of certain committee members. I just wanted to clarify that what's become obvious is that we have certain people who have taken the lead responsibility. Diane, for example, with SLAM, Rusty with the contracting people, the construction manager, Randy with the town board of approvals. Katie's obviously in charge of the parent teachers organization and communication with the school. And all we're trying to do is make sure that these people have the lead role, and that if you're going to be making a communication with SLAM, make sure you copy, for example, Diane. Oh, and Nick is going to be has taken on the role of working with our commissioning agent and also with the technical energy, high performance energy people. And Duke is Board of Education, and I'm Board of Selectmen, and over here is Mr. Board of Finance. So it seems to me that we've carved it up that Sean would be the guy for for security purposes, and Mike, I'm hoping, will be the guy that will keep the neighbors, communicate with the neighbors as much as possible. So just as I said, if you have an issue that you want to raise with, make sure that you keep the lead person in the loop of what you're talking about going forward, and that's what this message was all about.
Just to add to that, in our contract negotiations, which I discussed last week with you, SLAM asked that every communication with SLAM be directed to Amy first. And if it means going to Dean or somebody else, fine, but go to Amy first.
Right.
So not even necessarily emailing Dean and copying Amy, but directing it to Amy, and she
and
will
you
then
yes. She may
distribute that.
have a different arrangement for you, but everybody else.
Yeah.
You're special.
Thank you.
A second.
All in favor?
Oh, I was going to say that with regard to the RTM, I think that the three of us have to take our lumps with the appropriate committee, as it might be. Okay.
One question in that regard is, at what point would it be helpful to have kind of a public update? I'm not saying we do it at the RTM meeting on the later this month. I think it's the 27th. But at some point, just kind of giving everybody a general update that the papers could cover and just say, look, the committee's work is progressing and here's what's going on. I mean, you can go to the site and find out, I'm assuming, and watch these tapes.
But people don't, I understand. I think that we first talked about having the meeting with the parents and the neighbors as a combined meeting, and I think right after that, it would be coming to the RT, we should come to the RTM.
Right.
For an update.
Yeah. And we
I
talked
think-
to Slam about that last week too, about when they felt the drawings were appropriate, and I think we're getting
We're
there.
getting close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd
I
want to
think
start
we're-
with that, because then it's a look and feel type meeting as opposed to just a verbal update.
Right.
If
Exactly.
you look through the calendar, I thought, and Katie and I talked the other night, and I talked to some folks on the Board of Ed, it seems like if we can get through February, we'll be at a really good place, including an update with the state. So March seemed to be a good timeline to do
Great.
RTM, community, school community.
Correct.
neighbors.
That's great.
And we should have that audit.
Yeah,
Yep.
a quick check.
Yeah.
But to
Yeah,
that point, I
great
do
point.
think it's a good idea for us to even just tentatively try to hold dates for our own calendars, and then also when we think we're in the right spot, the more notice that we can give to both, the parents and community and the town at large, I think it just makes it that much better.
Okay. Is there anything else that should be discussed that anybody wants to bring up in regard to the project at this point in time?
Back to this real quick, do we know who's responsible on behalf of the owner for filling in all these blue boxes?
Do we know who's filling in those?
Or should we?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of... Well, we have, let's see, if we went down this real quickly for the blue on page 2, the grant application form, I think we did that with the RTM already. I could be wrong, but I thought that was already provided, because we had to have a resolution to cover the entire cost of the project, and at that time, we estimated it to be $63 million. The next emergency shelter doesn't matter. The next area for us is a phase 1 environmental assessment. I think we have that, don't we, Mike? And phase 2, I don't think we need, or 3. We haven't.
After phase 1, they said they didn't think we needed it.
That's right. So I'm just saying, so we don't need that. Asbestos, lead, PCBs. Did hygienics come back with all that?
Yes.
So we've got that covered. So I think that we've kind of done that already.
In fact, that reminds me that hygienics is going to be back at Oxford next week to take some soil samples outside some of the windows where they know there's caulking.
Okay. Good.
Do you want to fill in, I can get you, when I work with Mike Feeney and Mr. Lynch, do you want like the dates of when we applied and?
I'm assuming,
No, they have to give it to the state.
right, so I'm assuming we'll probably feed this to Slam, and Slam will fill this out and just give it to the state.
Slam has all that
Yeah,
information.
this is for SLAM to put together for the
Okay.
state.
I just didn't want them to be cute and say, oh, it was under blue owner. That's why we didn't fill it out for you.
We say we didn't sign your contract yet either. If there's something else, there's no public here for comment. I'll just say that our next meeting is in February 6th, here. However, as Randy mentioned, tentatively there'll be a meeting of our group with regard to all the town approvals next Thursday.
I just have one other thing.
Yeah.
I have been getting some questions from parents regarding some specific things that, asking if, like, for example, sinks in classrooms, are they not included? And I had chatted with Duke a little bit about the ed specs and having an updated copy. So I just think that might be a good consideration to have those formally updated and then posted on the website. I think that in particular could be a good thing for the public to be able to see in terms of like details about functionality of the school.
The ed specs have to be updated.
By the Board of Ed.
By the board.
By the board, right?
Right, exactly. So that was just a request that I was making. If we could get an updated copy of the current ed specs, given all of the last changes, and then be able
The
to
last change,
post that.
which were December 11th or something like that?
Yeah, there were.
So I spoke to Dr. Adley yesterday about that.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that to him last time we talked.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you've got to update the ed
Yeah.
specs.
Right. Yeah, so if we can just try to work to coordinate getting them and then posting them, I think that that would be a great thing to be able to put out to our parent body who could just, you know.
Mr. Board of Education?
Yes. On it.
Your task.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just had one more comment. So there, as I noted in my emails that I've sent out, there are 4 design development workshops. Second one's today. The third one is on February 6th, following our meeting. And then the 4th one is February 27th. And I'll continue to email the group and remind them, whoever can attend. It's really helpful to have, at least a couple committee members at each meeting. Luke has been faithfully there at every one, and Dr. Adley's been to most, and Mike Lynch has been to almost everyone as well. So it's been very helpful. And I just want to make sure everybody has access to the website, and if there are any problems with that, I can help you and get you the name of the person at SLAM. So I think it's important for everybody to just keep an eye on what happens at those meetings and skim through the meeting minutes and look at in particular the drawings to see where we are, to keep updated with that.
Motion to adjourn? Rusty? John? All in favor?
All right.